Call this. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, please proceed.
Call this meeting to order. I'm pleased to make this statement that this is something that's been added to the agenda. And Brendan said and intended this will be read at the beginning of every meeting going
Correct.
forward.
Yes.
Okay, very good. I will read this statement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages. John, we acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. So that's our statement. And I understand that staff has been tasked with finding ways to actually make that real rather than simply a statement we read at the beginning of every meeting. So we'll move on then. Can we call the roll?
Member Carlton?
Present.
Member Chasty? Mark is absent. Member Green?
Present.
Member Hanson Romero?
Present.
Member Moss?
Present.
Member Petrillo, Mark is absent. And then Member Abbott.
And I'm here. Very good. I see we did this out of order. I should have done that before the statement, but so be it. All right. Item 2, approval of minutes. The folks have had a chance to review the action minutes from I guess it's from September. The biggest actions there were setting up subcommittees. And if you've had a chance, we could have a motion to approve those minutes.
I move to approve them.
All right. Thank you, Member
I
Green.
second.
Member Hanson Romero seconds. Let's call the roll.
Member Carlton? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, spacebar unmute wasn't working. Aye. Approve.
Member Green?
Approve.
Member Hanson Romero?
Aye.
Member Moss, do you want to abstain for this one?
I wasn't there, so I will abstain on this first vote.
Good. And then Chair Abbott.
Aye. All right. Now I see we do have some attendees, so we'll open the floor for public comment. This is an opportunity for folks who aren't on the commission to have share what they're thinking about, things that are not on the agenda. So something that doesn't have to do with agenda items, we would invite you to raise your hand and you may speak. Not seeing anybody jumping up. All right, very good. We will move on then to announcements. An opportunity for committee members, but as well as maybe the staff would like to make some city announcements.
Yeah, so just regarding the Economic Development Committee, you may have noticed that Amy Smullins, member Amy Smullins is, so she's not at this one because she's no longer able to take part in the Economic Development Committee due to work schedule conflicts. She was very disappointed that she's not able to do it, but we certainly understand based on the work commitments necessary. And with that, I want to introduce our new member, Peter Moss.
Hi, thanks, Brendan. I don't know how much people caught of my earlier introductions to fellow committee members. I'm Peter Moss. I've lived in Albany for a couple of decades now. I have had the privilege to serve on both planning and zoning and the council. And as I was pointing out earlier, I realized a few days ago while I was on council, it was my signature that was on the resolution that set up the Economic Development Committee. So it seems like fair play that I'm on it at the moment. So I look forward to being able to help and input as I can and probably have a lot of catching up to do with what you guys have been up to, but I'm, look forward to the challenge.
No, I would say welcome, Member Moss. Happy to have you here, and I'm sorry to see Member Smullins go. I certainly appreciate her time here, and sorry to lose her. Any other announcements?
None from me. Any announcements from Chamber?
I thought Member Hanson Romero might have an announcement or two.
Yes. Oh, so this is that time that I can do this. Thanks, Todd. Thanks for the prompting. So Solano Avenue Association, sorry, my bed is shaking, or my area is shaking because I've got a dog like scratching right at the end. So sorry about that. Anyway, I just wanted to pop in and say that the Solano Avenue Association is going to bring forward what we are calling a winter stroll. And that's going to be happening on December 11th. And we are, having our businesses come out and the sidewalks, have some special activities and offerings going on at several of the businesses. You should check the Solano Avenue website for more details. Also, we have our Santa on Solano program happening for the first 3 weekends in December. And that, gosh, again, details are on the website. Todd, I don't have these times off the top of my head right now. So, excuse me. Also, let's see, what else? You may have noticed along Solano Avenue, there are red garlands up on the poles. And that is thanks to the Solano Berkeley bid and the City of Albany for connecting together and through the Solano Avenue Association and being able to purchase these new garlands, which is kind of a baseline. What we hope to do in the future is add more decor to these poles to make it even more festive in years to come. There's also a lighting program that I've been working on with the Solano Berkeley bid, as well as the Solano Avenue Association and the City of Albany, to provide funds for some businesses to have profile lighting put up, which will be placed, I believe, on December 15th. It's not meant to just be a holiday, but just winter lighting for the darker or earlier dark evenings, and provide some additional safety as well. So looking forward to all of that. And if you guys have any questions about it, please let me know. Todd, did I miss anything?
You now put me on the spot. Yeah, I don't think so. So I would say San on Solano is 12 to 4, Saturday and Sunday, the first 3 weekends.
Can I ask what profile lighting is?
Yes, of course. So profile lighting is kind of like what you would see in shopping malls and some other business districts, where it's a C9 light bulb, LED, and it goes across the roof line of the businesses. So it just provides some warmth, lighting, ambiance along our business district on Solano, and it's going to probably be done in phases. We only had certain businesses who took the opportunity to sign up for the program. So we expect another round to come out of this once they are actually put up on the building and some of the other building owners can see what they look like, and that jealousy effect will come into play at that time, I believe.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, the profile of the building. Yeah. Member Carlton?
I was just wondering if the winter stroll is going to be similar to the format of the Solano stroll this year?
Yes, we won't be closing down any streets or anything. And we're hoping, in fact, actually, this is one thing, if any of you could please join us for the public comment in the the council meeting that's coming up on Monday, requesting support of funds for this. The Solano bid in Berkeley has already sponsored the event, and we're hoping to get that support as well from the city council to provide some funding to be able to put on this program. I'm not sure if many of you know this, but the Solano Avenue Association is basically working off of borrowed funds. We've been fortunate to receive the EIDL first.
I'm not sure we need to go into all this right now.
Okay,
This
well,
is public comment.
but we are asking for,
Yeah,
as much
yeah.
support from the cities
I'm
that
a
we
little
can.
uncomfortable recruiting support for something that's not on the agenda. But I would say the one thing that's very unique about this event, just don't want to spend much more time on it, is it's on a Saturday. The strolls have always been on Sundays, and so one of the things that will be different is last time the organization was able to utilize unused space because a lot of businesses were closed. They're all going to be open now, so there's not going to be as many outside booths. They'll really be focused on much more. Well, the other one is very focused on the existing business, but this will be even more so. So, just wanted to mention that. Any other announcements? I do have one thing I was going to mention real quick. If nobody else has. So, yes, Jennifer.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to also say we had a great mixer at Orange Theory Fitness last night. We do the first Wednesday of the month mixers, and we had a great turnout. They were a great supportive business in our community, so it was really wonderful to have everybody there.
All right. And I would just mention that I was invited to the ribbon cutting for the Goodwill when Goodwill reopened in late October, and that was really normally I'm one of the ones holding the ribbon. They actually had me cut the ribbon, which is really exciting. I haven't done that before, so that was kind of neat. But the one thing that I thought was particularly relevant, I was talking to the CEO of at least the region of the area. And the thing that he is struggling with is hiring employees. We've heard this from a lot of businesses that he's just desperate for employees. So there we go. Just more and more data on that topic. All right. Any more announcements? Seeing none, we will then move on to our first and only agenda item. A presentation from Tom Southern on commercial real estate trends in the Bay Area. And I think we can invite Tom to be a panelist, and off we go. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So Tom, you are on, and if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Tom Southern. Hold on, let me get set up if you don't mind. There you go. And maybe you guys don't all know this, but I'm an Albany resident as well. I think I live not too far from Peter. I live on Ordway between Marin and Sonoma. I've done this in the past, last year, I think, and maybe even the year before. So I'm really happy to do this. I love Albany, and I love the business community here. So without further ado, I'm going to put a slideshow up for you guys on PowerPoint. It's mainly just talking cues from me, as we go through this. And let me share my screen for a second, okay? And what happened here? All right. Okay, hold on a second. Are you guys seeing my screen?
Oh, yeah, we are now.
Okay, hold on a second. Okay. How are we doing?
Good. Looks good.
Looks good. Okay. Obviously you guys recognize that, don't you? The Albany Bowl and the Village and all that. So first I want to start and tell you a little bit about Newmark, which is the company I work for. We're a kind of an international real estate company. We do a lot of brokerage in all sorts of all the asset classes, and then we do property management. We have a huge property management division. We have a huge consulting division. So this is kind of a snapshot of and we're traded publicly on the NASDAQ stock exchange. And so this is kind of I think this was 2020 when this slide was done for. So I'm going to move on from that. It's on you can have it if you want to look at it, but basically we collect a lot of data, which is what I'm getting at here. And this is the office I work in, which is in Oakland office, and it covers the inner East Bay. And these are the men and women who they are involved in a lot of commercial real estate transactions, and our company does a lot of work gathering the data that you're going to hopefully enjoy That's a little presumptuous of me, but presenting tonight about the commercial real estate market. Okay, so I thought, I had to limit the discussion a little bit because there's a lot going on out there and a lot to talk about. So we're going to geographically focus on Albany, Berkeley, and Emeryville, and Oakland. I would just say about this, in the past, there was a lot of separation between these markets, and now we're seeing a lot of interchange. People don't mind as much moving to Berkeley, to Emeryville, to Oakland as they did in Albany as they did in the past. I don't always mention Albany because for a lot of these, we're not a big player. But what happens in these markets affects Albany quite a bit. So that's why we're talking about this larger market. And then I'm going to limit the talk today to office, to lab, life science, and to retail asset classes that we cover. I'm not going to talk about multifamily today, and I'm not going to talk about hospitality, and or industrial, warehouse kind of products. There's just too much, happening, but had to limit it. So in the geographic thing, I just want to mention that, there's a lot of exciting things going on in Alameda right now. I know we're not going to talk about it, but it is truly, becoming a hub of lab life science development over there. So maybe that's another conversation. Maybe you guys have friends or know people. I think historically Alameda has been similar to Albany. They've been thought of similarly in terms of the vibe there, the lifestyle, but they have a lot more land than Albany does, and they're going through an amazing development kind of activity right now. Anyway, so, okay, let's go on. Before we start locally, I just want to give you a couple of quotes that are more globally or nationally. And that is, according to everything we know, the recovery from the pandemic is fully underway. Investment volume in commercial real estate in the third quarter 2021 hit a record high of $193 billion. Activity increasing 100% year over year. All 5 major property types that I mentioned are being very active right now. And as you can imagine, these REITs, which are important players in Oakland for sure right now, but also in Emeryville and Berkeley, as you'll see, have brought in a lot of investment capital. So the amount of dry powder accumulated by North American focused closed-end real estate funds has reached about $237 billion. That's equity, they can invest. They also are leveraged investors, so they borrow, so they can purchase about $530 billion worth of assets all over the U.S. These are U.S.-focused firms. So it's kind of boom time out there in the real estate sector again. And I know in not every asset class, but in many, it's boom time. And then more locally, and this is really what drives the commercial real estate market in the Bay Area, is VC funding. So many of our businesses are, they're not sort of older, long-established companies. They're newer, and they're trying to disrupt the markets they want to play in, whether it's, the meat industry, with Impossible Foods, who are trying to do, plant-based proteins, or Callista Media that's trying to, again, disrupt the book publishing industry. So there's a lot of these companies that are active in especially in life sciences. It's huge. So just to cut to the slide here, $99 billion through the first 10 quarters of the year, through October, was invested in Northern California. This is not worldwide. The other center of this money is the Boston area. This was done in 3,519 deals, 3,094 companies. So what's important from my perspective is this is 50%, almost 50% higher than the previous annual record, not than last year during the pandemic or 2019, but the previous record was 2018. This is again 50% higher in the middle of the pandemic, if you like. So there's an enormous amount of funds, investors investing in venture capital. And a lot of these are in industries that are coming up with new technologies and new products to disrupt and change the world we live in for the better, hopefully. And a lot of this is happening in the East Bay, and a lot of this is happening in Berkeley, Emeryville, Oakland, in the life science sector. Okay. So now for the bad news, you know, so this is sort of, I said, well, let's compare December 2019, December 31st, 2019, where we were in Berkeley, Emeryville, and Oakland in the office sector to, this is before the pandemic started, to the third quarter of this year, September 30th. It says 2019. I'm sorry, it's really 2021. That's a typo there. Yeah, I didn't catch. Apologize. So basically, what we're talking about is the amount of space available, the vacancy rates, and asking rents that we're seeing out there in the office. So a lot of you have friends or you occupy office space, right? So basically in Berkeley, you know, we've had 162,000 square feet come on the market. We've had negative net absorption for every quarter of the 9 quarters since basically the pandemic started. That means there's more space coming on the market that's being absorbed. The same is true of Emeryville and Oakland. So the vacancy rates went from 10.5% to 22% in Emeryville, from 12 to 20% in Oakland. And you'll see that there's subleases, we said 0, and now there more sublease space, not a lot in Berkeley, but a lot in Emeryville and Oakland. Well, we didn't even bother tracking sublease space, before the pandemic, because it was just a non-issue. And now it's a huge factor in the market as well, where companies can get bargains when they're looking for them. So, I want to say that it seems like a mixed message, but in a way it's not, because in the past, an indicator of a robust growing economy was absorption of office space. Companies were expanding, they had to lease office space, and they had to grow that space to accommodate employee growth, right? That's not true in the office sector through the pandemic. We've seen companies grow and yet give up and not use tons and tons of office space. And just to put this into perspective, I know we're not talking about it, but the total amount of inventory in Emeryville, if you wanted to lease all the space, in Berkeley, you'd have 3,400,000 square feet. Through the first 3 quarters of this year, there have been over 4 million square feet of negative net absorption come onto the market in San Francisco, right? So in the office sector, there's a lot of inventory, an unprecedented amount of office product, office inventory in our market available, okay? And I'll stop here and say, does anybody have any questions about the numbers? Maybe I'm too much in the weeds here, but if so, you please ask a question now. Otherwise, I'll continue on to the next slide.
I think I have, I appreciate the information, and maybe more of a request, and that would be try to tie this back into Albany. How does this, I understand this is the region and this all affects us, but just for those who aren't as familiar with the industry, just kind of try to draw that line a little bit as you go along. I think I would appreciate it.
Okay, well, I was going to do that at the end. I've got some data on Albany, and so I can skip over this kind of stuff. I'm
just saying, just keep in mind as you go along, just maybe a side here or there. And I think Member Mossmead had a question. I saw his hand go up just a second ago.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, when you say, basically I was in a roundabout way going to make what the point that Todd was just bringing up, that we don't really have that much office space in Albany, at least I've noticed. If we have office space, for the most part, it's medical office. And it's been kind of my experience in other parts of the East Bay that medical offices are doing okay in terms of filling up at least in some areas where they hadn't done so well, medical and dental offices. So I'm wondering if that's something that you don't consider when you're considering office space, or
yeah, I mean, medical office is included in here, so it's an aggregate number here. I'll just say this: is that right now you have more office space in Albany than you ever realized you have. I'm sitting in an office space which is in my home, as are many people who used to commute from Albany to these offices.
Right.
So my long-winded way of getting around to that is that's the impact on Albany. You know, you're going to see more. You see more people living here. You see, I mean, spending their days here, rather not just living here. So you see more people spending money locally than maybe they used to go to Central Business District, and now they're spending their money locally, and they're investing in their homes, in their home offices. So they're spending money, you know, I mean, maybe it's on through Amazon, but Albany still gets the sales taxes on all that money coming here to people fix up their home offices and their homes. So, so we're going to talk more about that later. I think I got too much into the weeds for you guys, and I apologize. So why don't I skip ahead and, you know, just touch quickly on this, is that the issues driving office, again, are long commute times to central business districts are unhealthy and expensive. Work from home allows more, it's more desirable for a lot of people. New technology like Teams and Zoom and Slack and many others coming online are allowing people to collaborate all over the world. And this allows for greater equity and inclusion in companies. You can sign up people where in the past, you know, they had to be geographically located to you. Now they can be anywhere in the world. They can be on the team. They can have an opportunity to lead and shine and grow as an employee from anywhere on your team. And this is all part of this new technology. And all of this has been put into hyperdrive because of the pandemic. Okay. So now that I want to contrast that to, and I'll try to be quick, go through here, but the lab world. The lab world is a completely different story. Right now, there's in excess of 600,000 square feet of demand for, this is talking about West Berkeley and Emeryville, for lab space, in excess of what people can deliver, right? So the other story was we have all this vacancy. The vacancy rate is 0, and there's 600,000 square feet of demand for space that can't be delivered. So rents have gone up from $475 to $625 a square foot. That's a 31% increase. And a lot of product is being converted from its historical use to labs. Like a company called Steelweight bought the old Peerless Lighting facility in Berkeley and is converting that to a lab. It's called The Labs. It's really cool. Saul Zant Center is office product. Some of it, portion of it underutilized. Wareham is converting to lab. Not all of it. Some of it will remain office. And then Baysimmer Center in Emeryville is a $125,000 office product that's being converted to lab by Harvest Property. Again, this is changing supply and demand. So people are going into labs. They're going in to do their work, and they can't bring that technology home with them. So, and that's driving a lot of employment. I mean, you probably heard about the, you know, multi-million-dollar 30-year agreement between Bayer Laboratories and the city of Berkeley to expand the lab campus Bayer Labs has in West Berkeley, which is huge. There's going to be 1,000 new jobs. Okay, these people are going to live somewhere, and many of them are going to live in Albany. They're going to be your neighbors. Okay. So just to be quick here, this is an interesting quote. Something bigger than travel is happening. The world is undergoing a revolution of how we live and work. Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb. Now you can travel anytime, anywhere, for any length, and live on Airbnb and work from there, basically. And when Apple CEO Tim Cook announced plans for employees to work full-time or 3 days a week in the office, a lot of them didn't like that. They said, we're being our most productive and most active at home, working full-time from home. And indeed, there's a lot of data that people are more productive working from home rather than commuting in. And so, all right, so what does this mean for Albany? I think I just said all that, but basically they're going to go to the restaurants and bars and coffee shops and retailers. There's some demand for small space. People have these tiny homes here, so I'm seeing in El Cerrito Plaza, those second floor office spaces are getting leased up, and some other spaces locally that are small offices because people want to be out of the home a little bit, but they don't want to commute into the central business district. And a lot of times companies will pay for those spaces for the right people. And there'd be continued investment in the homes. I've said all that. In the retail sector, okay, which is Albany a little bit. So retailers are experiencing stronger in-store sales in 2021 than they were in 2019. In El Cerrito Plaza, Joann's, Fabrics, Panda Express, Petco, C's, UPS Store, and Wingstop all are having better sales years this year than they did in 2019, which was many considered a high watermark year. So that's good. There's a lot of new leasing activity going on. There's actually not a lot of available space in Albany. All the COVID era rent reduction and rent deferment agreements are a thing of the past. I'm not saying they're not in effect anymore, but there are not many new agreements happening like that. What's available and what's in demand, we're seeing a lot of action for second generation spaces, especially second generation restaurant spaces. And a lot of that restaurant demand is it's really more for ghost kitchen kind of stuff than it is for walk-in. And I don't want to call it ghost kitchen, but if you go into a restaurant now, like a Sweet Greens or something, you'll see that there's just as much action and there's sort of going on in people preparing meals for online takeout and delivery as for people walking in and standing in line and placing their order. And that's just getting stronger and bigger all the time, that business. So anything that doesn't require a huge build out is well in demand, because build outs, tenant improvements, are more expensive. It takes longer to get permits. And again, I'm talking about generally, and it takes longer to get the work built out. So landlords are rents have not, in the retail sector, are stayed about the same as they were three years ago, but landlords are giving bigger TI allowances if need be, and longer free rent periods while a tenant does their build out. And that's so what the tenants are asking for is parking. That's always an important issue, and this is a sensitive issue in Albany, I know, but it's something that's very important to the retailers. We're seeing dedicated parking for curbside delivery and pickup being asked for. Restaurants want some patio seating. And then there have been a lot of conversations about security, how to improve security. We haven't been hit with any of the snatch and grab stuff like we've seen around the Bay Area, but people are it's not just that, it's related to other issues having to do with perhaps with homelessness or other things that are really an issue for some retailers. Okay, so this affects Albany too. The demand is more in these right now in the suburban markets than in the central business districts that are slower. And typically, more and more activity when we still see Sephora and these kind of, shops, and Foot Locker and other shoe shops. I know the Shoes on Solano is doing well. But mainly it's stores that provide some level of service that are in demand along our urban retail corridors and even in the malls, hair salons, nail salons, restaurants, fitness. We're seeing doctors' offices and physical therapy offices and, other non-traditional doctors' offices looking to open in more retail settings than they had in the past. In the past, they would go straight into a medical office building. Now they want some street presence. It would be easier to find. They want the parking so people can go and get in. So even on 4th Street in Berkeley, there's a physical therapy office opening up down there. I think typical of this, there's CVS announced they're going to close 900 stores and the stores they keep over the next 3 years, 300 a year over the next 3 years, the ones they keep, this is a factor of, people that got very comfortable during COVID ordering their meds online. They don't need to go in the store and wait and deal with out of stock situations. But where they see the value is in the stores, and keeping them is in the stores that provide services, flu shots, consultations with pharmacists, any of that can add value in those areas where they will keep many stores and emphasize that along with other products they have. So cut to the chase here. I made you wait for this. This is sort of recent sales transactions during the COVID in pandemic in Albany. These are closed transactions. Many of them are owner-user purchases. One investor, the Town Center Shopping Center, sold at a 5% cap rate in March of this year. I'll just let you guys read them. Also on the market, the Sprouts Angered Shopping Center in Albany Village is being sold by CBRE right now. They're asking about $24 million for that and some change. It's a complicated because the land continues to be owned by the University of California. Okay. So I'll leave the slide up and maybe you'll have some questions about that.
I have, this isn't all that's on the market currently, is that?
These are actually not on the market now. These are sales that happened.
No, I understand that, but you have the currently on the market, the Sprouts, but there's.
Oh yeah, no, there's some other stuff maybe on the market right now, but I just wanted to call out the Sprouts thing.
Okay. You didn't have a slide then prepared for like what is currently available, or?
No, it's easy enough to find. You just go to
LoopNet.
LoopNet, exactly. Yeah.
I just want, I do residential real estate, so I just wanted to bring that to the rest of the committee's attention. Mm-hmm. I also noticed in your slide, parking is always on the plate for many businesses.
Yes.
And I know personally, even some other restaurants that I've talked to in the past who had looked at Solano but decided against Solano because of the lack of parking.
Well, restaurants, are in my world, they are a subcategory within the retail overall framework. Okay. But parking, is always an issue, and especially some of the chains, the larger national chains have their cookie cutter, format, and they've got to meet that format, and they're not going to go there if they can't. So, Solano Avenue is more, I would call it urban retail, although we sort of act like a suburb, but, we're configured more like an urban. There's not an urban area. There's not a lot of malls or open spaces, so we have little shops. Each one is owned separately. They're not owned by the same, so that you don't have one master controller who's worried about a tenant mix, and making sure everybody complements each other. And, it's whatever, people agree to and do. And yes, parking is an issue on Solano Avenue. I would say, what you see Flowerland doing right now, they're doing this where they've got people standing there and customers come and they pick up, curbside. They're doing a lot of that, and I can see more of that happening with other retailers. But you're not going to get some restaurants because you don't have the parking that they want, right? It's just a fact.
Yeah, and I've noticed to your point of the curbside takeout, businesses requesting that, because I see all the time people being pulled into driveways and red zones and stuff for, or even double parking on Solano.
Yeah.
Or picking up from a lot of the businesses.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. We can start. It's not part of my discussion today, but parking etiquette is at an all-time low, in my personal opinion, around here. Yeah. But we're not, I don't have the data to back that up. Okay. But I did want to end with this slide and say that, one of the most important things about Albany in the future from an economic development point of view is this what I would consider from an urban area, an underutilized asset called the Albany Field Racetrack, for horse racing. Now that may be controversial. I don't want to upset horse race lovers out there, and I like the races myself, but that I know those folks are being approached by many investors. I know in the past, the guy who did the Grove in LA wanted to put a huge high-end shopping mall there, but now it's the lab developers and the multifamily, so you remember this affordable housing thing is important. And we, in Albany, I didn't talk about it today, is doing positive steps on there, but that, you could turn it into a park for people to use because there's more and more people densely around here, or you could turn it into a lab life science, mixed use development, lab life science and multifamily, or even residential housing. So there's still some underutilized land here, in my view, but Albany Village is controlled by the university, and I think they probably have their own agenda for it, so but unfortunately Albany does not have a lot of land, and as a resident here, I definitely see the more and more people around, the more harder and more important parkland is to accommodate all the people living here. But you're the Economic Development Council, so if you want to develop some economy, put a bunch of lab life science and apartments out there in the Albany Fields Racetrack, in my humble opinion. Anyway, so that's the end of the presentation. I'm sorry I got too much into the weeds of it, but I think Albany is in a great spot right now. With the home office use, and people love living here, and people feel the main asset we have is people feel safe and secure when they walk out their door, and they got nice neighborhoods, and I think that's hugely important. Okay, any more questions?
All right. Well, well, thank you very much, and we'll open up committee questions. I see Member Moss has had his hand up for a while, so Member Moss.
Thank you. I have a ton of questions, as some might expect. I usually did on council. I agree with quite a bit of what you were saying. I'm going to leave the parking issue behind because that's really, I suspect we could talk about that a whole lot. And I know there's lots of different views about parking on Solano Avenue. But some basic questions. You were showing prices for what commercial buildings had gone for. Do you have data on what rents are relative to other commercial areas, and how are our square foot prices higher or lower? And how is that being affected right now? It would be one.
So on the retail sector, the information, prices are about the same as they were before COVID came. They haven't been affected negatively. They haven't experienced growth, which is a problem. And landlords, in order to get tenants in, have been offering larger TI packages and longer free rent periods. Okay, so you couldn't just say take it as is, and get a deal done. You can get your rent number. This is from a landlord's perspective, right? So I don't see a lot of availability of the little shops in Albany now, and certainly the rates are all over the place. And I didn't put the rent rates in because I can do that a little bit, but I didn't. You can be, I don't know, $2 a square foot up to $4 a square foot. It really varies. Solano Avenue is different, and whether they're a national tenant in a Class A kind of building that's really built out for them with some parking, or whether they're so what I think Sprouts is paying $425 a foot triple net for their building over there, right? In Albany Village. which for their sales level is considered a little high. I think in El Cerrito Plaza, they have a big box that was Bed Bath & Beyond that didn't make it out of the pandemic. And that's like, I forgot how big it is. Is it 30,000 feet? I don't know, but they're asking $2 a foot for that space. But the second generation restaurant space they have available with patio seating, they're trying to get over $4 a foot for triple nets, and their triple nets run another $1 a foot, right?
Okay.
So there's going to be a range, asset type. Restaurants are going to get more still than just empty boxes. And it's going to be a function of parking and how new and is it totally up to code? You know, does it have sprinklers and ADA compliant and, you know, everything, or is it more of a, you know, an older product that's a little tired looking? You know, all these things affect value in a big way. So I can give you a range of values if you're looking to do there. But I would say right now it's getting to be a tighter market in Albany. And I would also say that from my perspective, it's exciting. Lower Solano has got a great vibe going on right now. I mean, the best it's ever had. I moved here in '93, and you know, it's people overuse that word vibe, but there's really, you know, locals get together and enjoy the whole the food and everything about it is great. I know when Umami came there, and with the Oakland Spice Shop, and now the Humane Society's got a store, and there's a cider shop going in. I mean, it's happening, you know. So that's you have a lot to feel good for in Albany.
So Tom, would you attribute any of that good vibe to the fact that an awful lot of the restaurants down in Lower Solano have pushed out onto the street, giving up parking for the patio space that you say that they're both looking for parking, you said at one point, and patio space. Most places in Albany, especially in Lower Solano, don't have a patio in behind or a roof patio, but so they're making do with patio that's in the public sector on the streets.
Well, if they couldn't open, right, because of the pandemic, and for a while they couldn't without outdoor seating, right, and stuff,
yeah,
then there'd be no vibe, you know. So yeah, I don't know, you know. So, but I would say the mix of, you know, the coffee shops and it's a lot of local businesses, and you know, the pricing is right for our market. I mean, so you know, if right now, if we're opened up and people feel comfortable going into crowded restaurants more, you know, and you took away and put the parking back, would the vibe change down there? I don't know. You know, I mean, yeah, that's a tough question, but maybe a little, you know, maybe the outdoor, you know, action is a lot, it adds to it. I think that's a valid point, Peter, but there's a lot of other stuff going on as well. And don't forget, a lot of it is that people are not commuting into their offices in San Francisco or Oakland, and they're working from home. And so they can come out for a 4 o'clock dog walk, a coffee break, and create vibe. So
yeah, I would make one more comment, and I'll let somebody else ask some questions because I have plenty more. But it occurred to me when I was looking over the draft that I think the committee had done on what is Albany and the commercial areas, and it was picked out that we had 3 commercial areas: Solano, San Pablo, and then along the freeway. We actually have 4 commercial areas, and the 4th one, it might be more office space, as you mentioned, in people's back bedroom or basement or in my garage space here that has been turned into office. So it really kind of questions what is commercial space anymore, and what are we talking about when we're talking about economic activity? It isn't so confined. As far as I can see.
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Peter.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions before we open it for the public comment? Be a question on any of the things they've talked about. Not seeing any. I do have a couple myself. What would you say would differentiate Albany to a commercial, potential commercial renter or purchaser?
Well, I mean, the first thing, you know, I would say is what I said earlier. It's the demographics are great here. You know, you got a lot of highly educated, high earners, family, schools are districts great. There's an article in 2018, I think, San Francisco Magazine put out saying Albany is the #1 small town in the San Francisco Bay Area. They had about 110 small towns, and Albany was ranked higher than Piedmont or whatever. And so if you're a retailer, that's the kind of customer you want, right? Now, the challenge is finding the asset shape, sizes, parking that we discussed that can meet their needs. You know, that's really hard to find in Albany. So when they pulled off that Sprouts anchored center on University of California land, in my view, that was a huge deal. I can't believe they pulled that off. You know, there'd been talk about Safeway trying to redo some stuff on Solano Avenue. I think that's not going to happen for a while, you know, I don't know what else to say. I mean, it's the demographics, it's the peace, quiet, and that make this a very desirable area. But if you're I think maybe it's a good thing if you are a local mom and pop or small independent, you have a much better chance of opening here because you're not going to be competing against. You may not get the exact thing you want. You got to be willing to give up some things, but you may be able to get going here. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, very good. That's interesting. That in particular wasn't something I thought about. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
You know, here's another question, and this is more like you, just kind of your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
We have a very problematic corner. And that is the corner of San Pablo and Solano, where it is the gate of Solano Avenue. Mm-hmm. We have a decrepit, closed Subway restaurant. We have a long abandoned, long vacant restaurant property for Albany, and then we have a kind of a early liquor store, and then we have a very nice new business and picnic. So we've got two vacancies there. Do you have any ideas for what we might try to get in there, or what would do well there? I think the biggest issue with the large restaurants is there's no parking. There's not much parking, not enough parking to support the sort of facility we might need.
Well, I used to go in one of those closed restaurants occasionally. For Sunday
Montero's,
or the other one, maybe. But anyway, so I think a restaurant could work there without the parking. You know, it's a question. So those buildings need to be upgraded a lot. They need big TIs on the interior of them. And in this market, if the landlord's not willing to do that, and the tenants, there are not many tenants who are willing to do that. So, the owner's making a calculation. Do I wait until the market improves and get a tenant who can put some money in there, or do I do it myself, right? I have not been in the former Subway site. I don't think that's been on the market that long, though. It didn't close. It closed this year, right? Or more? No?
It's been more than a year. I think it was pre-pandemic. It was shut down. It wasn't related to the pandemic. I think it's been at least 2 years.
I don't know about what to do. I haven't really put any thought into that space. I used to eat at that Subway, and I don't think it has a hood and, or any of that kind of stuff. They didn't need those for Hubways. I don't see a small retailer going in there, I don't know, Mike, New Jersey Mike's maybe or something.
Yeah, there we go. Here's kind of a related question. And what kind of impact does that have on the whole avenue for people considering a prospective opening a store or something on the avenue? They see this unappealing corner as a major corner. Does that
I think
like curb feel or?
So I think that Picnic, is that what it's called? Picnic is a exciting development. You know, it took them a long time to get it done, but to me, that's real. I see lines out, you know, to go in it, like maybe not Rotha quality lines, but still lines, you know, and but so I mean, I'm not sure, you know, other than making the buildings look, you know, newer, you know, and having some investment put into them, you know, what you can do really, you know.
So what can cities do to encourage that or to help that? Or is there money available the city can help property owners
well,
acquire?
each city has money, you know, available. You know, you'd know more about what's available in Albany than I do. I don't. In the past, it's been, I think, whatever monies they have are more about housing related rather than commercial related stuff. You know, if a low interest loan to a property owner to you know, to put some fix it up, make it look nicer, but you know, this is sort of, I mean, I'm a free market person, right? So I just, you know, it's unfortunate, but I want the owners and the tenants to figure it out and do something smart. And look, you know, you and I won't patronize it if it's terrible, you know, and something else will, you know, until they figure it out. Yeah.
I'm just looking something that this committee can do. That's all.
Yeah.
Just looking for something.
If you can get some money, if you can say, I can get you a really low interest loan, if you'll put it into the building, you know, and or something like that, that might be a strong inducement to somebody to do that, you know. But you're going to want to make sure it gets used, you know, on the, you know, have a say in what's happens to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, all right. Let's see. So I did have a question about the dining and on the parklets, and what kind of value would that represent to a restaurant? Say that they're able to fully open up again.
Yes.
And they have access to 2 parking spaces and 4 or 5, 6 more tables.
Yeah.
Is that basically just additional square footage for them, or is it more complicated?
I mean, in the Bay Area, I think it's important, you know, and I don't have a number for you. I don't say, look, if you're an owner for property and you have a restaurant with no outside seating versus some, do you get, how much more rent do you get for that or something? I don't have that number. You know, it's something maybe I could look at, but I certainly don't have it on the top of my head. But yeah, during COVID, you know, what it's shown people is that maybe they can survive, you know, they're flexible. So that flexibility is huge. And it depends on the type of restaurant, you know, but, you know, takeout, you know, and outdoor seating, because we have the climate we have here, are both important. And I don't see that changing, you know, for a long time, you know. So both the easy to take out and outdoor seating is something people all ask about. I don't have a value number for you. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's kind of a general question, and I figured there would be value there. We just don't know what
I can't give you a dollar amount, but I do.
And it would make a difference between a restaurant that maybe is right next to a bulb out and already has access to some space versus one that really doesn't. It's just a narrow sidewalk, and the parking space would be all that they would have. I can see how that value might differ.
Absolutely, you know, and keep in mind, you know, the values to these commercial buildings for a lot of people, we saw the sales, a lot of those were owner user sales, but many of them would be investor sales. You know, they'd be sold as leased investments. Well, the value, maybe they paid X dollars for it, you know, and they put some money into it. Now, if they want to do a lower rent number, that they really diminish the value of their building. So that's also what's driving them, is to get the better rent numbers, so that the building, when they want to, if they want to sell it, it's worth more. But yeah,
and of course, during the pandemic, it's been, you know, life or death. So it's you know, kind of infinite value as far as that's concerned. But yeah, going forward.
Yeah, but they can afford to wait. Sometimes they do a calculus. It's better to wait and have it empty than rent it out at a much lower rate. The way it affects the value, you know, it's all about predicting the future. But to go back to your point, yes, if you have a narrow area with no outdoor seating for a restaurant in today's even post COVID, it's much more of a challenge to lease. 100%.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Very good. Any other questions? I suspect Member Moss may have some more. He was polite in letting other people speak up, but we can go back to him if others don't have questions. Welcome, Member Chasty. Nice to see you.
I do have more questions and comments, but I can save those until after public comment, if somebody else wants to express them.
Very good. Very good. If no more questions from the committee, we can go open it up to the public. Very good. I do see one hand already. So, Brennan, if we can let them in.
Edward Fields.
Mr. Fields, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Ed Fields. I'm an Albany resident for, I guess, approaching 2 decades. I have a question for Mr. Southern.
Mm-hmm.
As San Pablo Avenue redevelops
Mm-hmm.
with high-density housing,
Mm-hmm.
looking at the longer term, do you think that the ground floor street frontage should be developed as commercial or strictly residential?
Well, this is a great question, because if you look around the Bay Area, of a lot of new products that apartment buildings have been built, many times these ground floor retail areas are sitting vacant, right? And there's just not the demand for all that space, and obviously cost and everything comes into it. So I guess, what I would say for Albany is you should have some retail space, but not as much as in the last decade we were making developers put in, right? And I think, frankly, the project that Trachtenberg and Morgan Reed are doing is going to be great for Albany. And I like the way they cut back from the original proposal the amount of space developed devoted for coffee shops and retail and stuff, because it's going to be vacant. It's better to just have it for housing and then have some kind of a space. But there's these people who live there, they can walk over to El Cerrito Plaza, they can go to Solano. There's already all these places they can go. They don't, it's hard to imagine that need. So I'm perfectly comfortable with that right now. If you were taking out a lot of inventory of retail and displacing people, and maybe it'd have a different story. But really, they got rid of a bowling alley, and they're going to add a little retail there. So I think it's great. I think they downsized it. It's going to look nicer. It's going to be greater. It's going to be more housing. We're not going to talk about parking, but I like what they did. My personal opinion.
And Ed, we can have a little bit of a discussion here. I think we have the time. So if you'd like to ask a follow-up or something, feel free.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead. You're on. You're
Okay. Am I still there?
Yeah. Yes, you are. You're free to
Okay. Well, I guess the only thing I would add to that is that is a way to get newer, more modern space. I guess that's the only thing.
Yeah, but it's good. So I'm not saying do away with it, but I'm saying be sensible. I mean, look at the area and how much is already available, already around it, and then balance what we need. And if that location in that area, do we need a lot of retail on the ground floor, or can we, does it make sense given everything around there that we don't require as much and instead use it for housing or parking or what other kinds of uses, bike storage, you have you. So to me, I like the fact that at that location on that site, they cut back the retail. If it was on Solano Avenue, I might say, no, we want more, So that's my whole attitude.
All right. Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the public? Please raise your hand.
Hi, Robert.
You're not the public, Member Tuesday. Just a minute.
I'm almost the public.
You're almost the public. And I think that now I see no more questions for the public. I'm happy to bring it back and recognize Member Chase.
Tom, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed the beginning of your presentation. So I had a question. We've had a soft demand for commercial and office space. Now office space is taking a hit because of people working from home and just depending on the kind of business you're in, you might have a loss of business, and that will get you to cut back on expenses. And so there's been a bit of that. And I'm just wondering if you've seen a trend, and there's a lot of pressure for residential. So I wondered if you've seen any trend toward shifting office space back to residential, at least for the time being.
I've seen more conversion of office space to lab and life science space of any kind of product. I said we went over this earlier in the East Bay, and again, I'm talking about just Berkeley, Emeryville, Albany, Oakland. So I have not seen this conversion yet, although I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised people are talking about it. And I think in San Francisco, there's actually been some movement along those lines, which is, but so, in my take on it, there's a lot of leases that are still being paid. So even if space is empty, their tenants have longer term leases that they're still paying rent on. And so you'll see the asking rents haven't really come down from pre-pandemic, even though the vacancy rates have doubled and more. So when they're really faced with some of these things, and who knows, they may be planning this for that now, there's been this belief among owners that people are just going to come back to the office like the way it was before. And if these tenants don't renew their leases and say, I don't need that much space. I can get by with 3,000 feet rather than 10,000, or I can get by with 10,000 rather than 100,000, whatever. Then there'll be some pressure, much more pressure on these owners of these buildings in these sky rises, and maybe some interest. But there's also, technical cost and what's involved in converting some of these. And some of these buildings, have the infrastructure, maybe there's floor-to-floor seats, plates, heights, and all sorts of that you can do that. And some are just not going to be. It's too expensive to convert them to housing. It's too much of a challenge. And in downtown Oakland, there's still a lot of housing to be absorbed because it's all been being built. We're seeing it be absorbed, and we didn't talk about multifamily. So I guess it's a long-winded answer to your question. I don't see it yet in the East Bay, but I could see it coming. What I'm amazed at is there's still these big transactions of these office towers happening in Oakland. And, I think it takes nerves of steel to buy right now, my personal opinion. But they're happening. So
is that like what we're looking at is surplus investor money just trying to find a home?
People are making bets about what the future is going to have, and they think that, when the pandemic's over, people will be wanting to come back to offices. Owners will want their employees back, and we'll have growth. We'll have rent growth. We've got an economy that's really doing well. And so they have a vision for the future, and that's what they're placing their bets on, and other people are not. But, there are still people who are long-term believers in the office market in downtown Oakland, for sure. Yes, and some have, these REITs have gone to their investors and raised a bunch of money, and if they don't invest it, they're going to have to give it back or whatever. So they're in a tough spot.
So the other thing I was going to mention, I was up in Bellevue, Washington recently, and I'm looking at, I had some contact with people in a high-end rental.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, pretty high-end, way more than you'd pay in Albany.
Yeah.
And what I found was that the buildings, these ground floor commercial spaces that we would normally have imposed, they're using them for things for the tenants, workout rooms, temporary office space, just a billion little clever ideas for what you're doing. And so they still have the option of these spaces, but they're not being used for standard commercial stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the question is, have you designed some of that stuff into other parts of the project already? Is there a fitness center there, in addition, so that, what kind of, so yes, there'll be opportunities like that. It's case by case basis for sure. There's a guy in Berkeley on San Pablo Avenue who converted his retail into live work lofts. He was able to do that. It requires the city to zoning people to go along with that. That's not always easy, and it's easier in Albany to get somebody to listen to you than it is in Berkeley, and I think that's a huge advantage of Albany. But still, yes. So those repurposing that retail for other uses is great, but that's Plan B. That's if but yeah. Robert, did I answer your question?
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't really a question. It was just sort of an observation as to kind of what I've seen people been doing. And the net result of that was that these people were getting what I thought were pretty extraordinary rents for the apartments.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the apartment, you go to LA, the new apartments built down there all have to have swimming pools, right? In a singles area, or stuff. And not so much here, but they're a lot with fitness, centers and with community areas and rooftop decks. And so there are a lot of amenities being built into all these new apartment buildings. I don't remember the amenities being built into Albany, the one that Trachtenberg is doing. But, their accommodation for Albany was family size units for people who want to come here for the schools, which is something you don't see in Oakland very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we can open it up. Anybody questions, comments, discussion? I would just say that, Member Moss?
Yeah, lots of questions and comments. You mentioned at one point that there may be some trends towards small office space. The El Cerrito Shopping Center second floor space was, I think, the example you pointed out, and not something like that might be coming back. And we do have that kind of office space in a few buildings in Albany. I'm wondering if you see any future for something that was popular a few years ago and then kind of blew up and went away, the WeWork office space where people share the printers and the other equipment, and I know some of them got quite complicated in Oakland because I visited a few of them, and you could get a health insurance through the landlord in the WeWork space. Is anything like that going to return, or still?
Well, it hasn't gone away. WeWork is still, it's not the behemoth it was before, but it's still a major player in the market. And some of the other that are long-time temporary office space, like Regus, have their own brands for that. So it's still active. It's definitely not like all the office sector. It's active. It's less active than it was. But no, I don't see it going away. It's perfect for the tech world. We're all VC funding tech startups around here. It's a perfect scenario for them. In fact, what I see is a real demand from tech people in the industrial sector. I want a warehouse lease like my WeWork lease, month to month, flexible. I can expand, I can track, and that product doesn't exist. Although there's a new Seattle-based company, Robert would love to hear this because all the creativity is coming out of Seattle. That took over. It's a big warehouse on Central in Richmond, right? And they're having they master lease the big thing, and then they chalk it up with a lot of small kind of storage industry, not like a storage units, but where you can go in and do some work, in warehousey kind of things. So that's an attempt to do WeWork for that, in my opinion. So that's where, that world that's scalable, no long-term commitment, and I'll pay a premium for it, driven by the tech world, is not going away anytime soon.
Okay, thanks. You mentioned, you said that venture capital was driving a lot of what's going on in East Bay, particularly West Berkeley, I presume Emeryville, and maybe parts of Oakland. The venture capital, let me see if I can figure out where is that venture capital coming from? Is that just wealthy local people? Is it foreign capital coming in? Do we know?
I don't know. I don't track it that close, but it is coming from, it's worldwide. Capital is worldwide source now, basically.
Yeah.
And it's, coming from these, the major New York investment houses, that put together, either it's funds. I mean, it's not just New York. I mean, San Francisco and Silicon Valley funds are huge, but that's where the money is coming from.
Right, and is a lot of that going in particularly into that kind of lab thing that you say, the medical labs and development lab things.
Yes.
So that's where that's ending up. I think the only other comment I'm going to make at the moment is, there's the talk about this retail on the bottom floor. It was always my view or perspective on planning and zoning and later on in council that, or observation that a lot of the space that's built out for retail is not very inviting to anybody, particularly when you're on a street like San Pablo. It's just flat space. What makes Solano so charming is that we have that kind of quirkiness to each building. We have small buildings that people are just more appealing to, I think, to most people who are, especially if you're walking along. You walk along one of these bigger buildings on San Pablo, and I maybe the Trachtenberg project will be better. I don't know. But, just looking at it, it looks like it's just a solid glass that is not the kind of space that most people want to go into. And you don't have the parking that you say the chains want. I don't think we'll ever have that. And personally, I think that's a good thing because it does make spaces more available for small mom and pop operations. But, if you have just these solid glass walls on, a state highway, which San Pablo is, it's just, why would you want to go down there? Even if there is parking on the street, and for the most part, there is parking on the street, it's just not something that's going to, pull you in.
Well, people do business on Solano Avenue all the time. It's just not, you're not going to find shoes on Solano, for example, or, some of the dress shops or clothing shops up in Solano that make it charming. I don't see that happening at a shop like that on San Pablo Avenue. But there are many other uses that, you could go there for, that are destination kind of things. But I agree, I think the redesign, the last design I saw, I think they cut down the total retail square footage from like 14,000 to 5,500 or something. And one of it is a coffee shop or restaurant with an outdoor patio area that's set back a little, at least the patio is. So, yeah. I think, I think it's got a reasonable chance of being quite nice, to be honest with you.
Okay. All right. Well, actually, I have one more that I'm going to throw out and let somebody else speak. But, and this is really coming from left field in terms of retail. I don't know how many of anybody on the committee or listening in have been to Santa Fe in recent years, but there's something called Meow Wolf down there, which is a kind of an art exhibit, wild fanciful art that's really cool. They've actually now gone into retail in both Las Vegas and Denver. And the whole idea that retail needs something to attract people in that's more than just parking spaces and a good deal or a shopping thing. They're actually having to do some kind of I can't share a screen and show you what they're doing, but I would strongly recommend, if you haven't heard of this, Google it and see what that's about. But it does seem to be, to me, a kind of a trend in retail, maybe not totally applicable to Albany, but perhaps the idea that we have something that's going on, be it art, music, whatever, on our streets and our areas that make it more attractive for people to want to come there, hang out, eat out, spend money in a retail location.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what I love about the vibe in Solano Avenue right now is people, they bring their dogs, they meet up with their neighbors and friends, they talk, their kids, and they talk about, schools or whatever they want to talk about, and it's, they do what they want there, and it's great, and I anyway. So. But I agree with you. I mean, what you're talking about is something Denny Abrams and Eric Muehlbach on 4th Street would want to do, right? Is to liven that because there's some new stuff happening. There's going to be a showroom for electric car vehicles over on 4th Street. There's a dim sum restaurant out of this city. So there's a lot of good stuff happening on 4th Street over there. And the more they can make it alive, the better in Berkeley. And, it's almost Albany.
Yeah. Well, 4th Street has been pretty successful. Denny Abrams was in the right place at the right time, I would say. But, but I think there are things we can kind of look at down there that we could apply in one way or another to at least Solano Avenue.
Yeah. Okay.
I see Member Chasey has a hand.
Yeah. Apropos of what happened at 4th Street and the idea that we're having trouble with tenants and tenancies down on the corner of Solano and San Pablo. Many years ago, the Berkeley Opera was looking for a new home. And so myself and some other people met with them, and we, at the same time, the theater that's down at the lower end of Solano was for sale. Mm-hmm. And so we worked out an arrangement where we could have bought the city could have bought that property for about $600,000. And that comes with a tremendous amount of space around it. Mm-hmm. And we had the Berkeley Opera prepared to move in as a tenant. Politics being what they were, the idiots in City Hall decided that it was not a good enough deal, and they certainly couldn't risk that kind of capital or get the city involved in any such venture. But we would have had an anchor tenant, and it would have made the downtown, if you want to say, part of Solano Avenue into a big regional draw. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of thinking that we were hoping that we could get out of this committee to try to do things. Like, for example, Sprouts, it's okay, but we could have had Whole Foods, and it would have made a lot more money for the city of Albany. So it's part of the economic development question is a city like Albany, it hangs on barely because it's very expensive to run a city, and a small city like this, and we don't have a lot of retail that would generate a lot of sales tax, and we don't have other things that generate. We largely rely on property taxes, and we've been lucky because we have two things that are not seen when we talk about all this, and one is a high value of property taxes because of the schools, and also because of the safety factor. Albany is one of the safest cities to be. Bank robberies, they just caught bank robbers trying to rob the Mechanics Bank. How often do you read that story? Most often you read about the bank robbers got away or people got shot or something like that. So those are kind of intangibles that Albany has, but we should and could be able to attract. Like when it came time to getting an Apple store, 4th Street got the Apple store. Somehow Albany didn't figure out that this was even an opportunity for itself. So there are anchor tenants and there are things that would make a difference. Mm-hmm. I don't know how well we'd be doing right now with Berkeley on Solano, but with Shakespeare on Solano or the opera on Solano because of COVID, but that's a separate problem. That's a temporary problem. And those things will never go away. So I think that the things that Tom is talking about have to do with what works for commercial space. But the vibe that happens in downtown Albany is an accidental vibe because it's a luxury we can afford. You know, you can have the what's the guy's name who sells the cashew ice cream, and you know he's doing great. That's wonderful. But those are 4th Street type things. And by the way, it's not that a luck that Denny was in the right place at the right time. No, 4th Street's luck was that Denny came to 4th Street and took something that was almost nothing and turned it into what it is. It was his genius and his constant tending of that garden that made it happen. It was nothing, you know, without, you take Denny out and that place would still be, it wouldn't be what it is. So,
Yeah.
Anyway, end of point.
Okay, thank you.
All good points, Robert. All good points. Yep.
Any other questions or comments from the members? I just have, member Hanson.
Hi, yeah, you know, also talking about the San Pablo corridor and the businesses, one of the things that I think also makes it special and unique is the amount of, you know, automotive repair businesses that we have down there. And so I think we get a lot of traffic from people who will drop off their cars to have them repaired, and then can also walk around and, you know, support the businesses on San Pablo as well as Solano. So I just want to, you know, bring up the factor that we do have these long-standing auto repair businesses. In fact, one unit was just leased to a new business called Brakes Only, which is next to the transmission shop on Washington and San Pablo. So I think that is really beneficial for our San Pablo Avenue section.
Yeah, I agree. Can I add about taxes for the city? You know, to the extent that online purchases are taxed with sales tax, and I think don't you pay sales tax on Amazon goods now? I know you didn't for years and years.
Yeah.
I think, so we get that if they deliver it to somebody's home office here or somebody's home, Albany gets that tax revenue. So if you're buying a good and service and you're doing it online versus going into a store, as long as you're buying it and having it shipped to your home, you know, or buying it in Albany, we're going to get the same tax revenue for the same, you know, as I understand it. Now, I'm not a tax expert. So I don't know. We just need to be creative about, you know, if meeting budget is getting more development and revenue out of the land at the Albany racetrack would be my vote, rather than, you know, worrying about trying to create a competition for Denny and Eric down on 4th Street in Albany. I think, you know, that would be huge for us as a city. And I think it would be exciting for us. But
Careful, that's.
I was waiting for Robert's hand to go up.
That's we're not going to develop the park and fill it with concrete. The waterfront is one of the most.
We don't need to talk about. Yeah,
it's one of the most exciting things that happens in Albany and stays that way. And it's a major draw, and it's a major recreational thing that makes Albany very special.
Yeah, but I'm not saying do away with the waterfront. I mean, of course we keep the waterfront. I'm not saying on city land. It's private property right now. It's a racetrack. You know. So anyway.
So I'm going to move us on because there's nothing going to come from this conversation.
Careful,
nothing good is going to come from this conversation.
I stepped into it. I apologize.
That's all right.
A lot of history here.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, did I see your hand go up? Or are you just fending it off? Okay. So, I see your hand go up, or did you have something else? No, I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, I did for a second there. Yeah, as far as the racetrack goes, yeah, I sort of like that other idea that you had, which I believe we became very close to getting at one point, which was more of a lab thing going on at least part of the Golden Gate Fields. Yeah. One point, Lawrence Livermore was going to build a big lab down there. Yeah. And Robert can probably might have better memories of this than I do, but I believe that a lot of the parties that had concerns on that were in agreement that this was something that might go forward. It didn't go forward. In fact, it was then went to Richmond and it never went forward there. It was unfortunate, but in any case, there's a long argument about the way I feel about Golden Gate Fields in that area of what you can do or can't do and what's appropriate, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean that.
I am trying to keep us out of that rabbit hole.
Yeah, I apologize. It's my fault. You can all, we can, let's move on for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I just have one final question, and that is, if you were sitting in one of our seats, what would you think that this committee could do to advance or to promote economic development in Albany? What would you think would be something important that this committee could take on?
I think I said that, although I stepped into it, right, a few times already, so I'm not going to bring it up again. But, I think, what's happening in Albany, it's a easy city to deal with in terms of permitting and getting stuff done. It's friendly and it's safe, and to me, it's getting better of a vibe every year. It's going to be constant fight to balance the parking needs of businesses versus the desires of the people many of the people who live here, to sort of do away with cars altogether, and that kind of stuff. But so I would come down on the side of making sure that the businesses have some parking solution for them. I would keep that as a focus, because we're promoting business interests. But I'm just loving the way things are evolving in the city, and I would so I don't have any other concrete. The major thing I said was, if we could do so, I would love to see something happen on the racetrack. That's all my whole thing was. I really see that as a huge asset for the city. Not doing away with the waterfront, not at all. And
careful, you're stepping back into it. So
I know. But he asked the question, by the way. He asked the question.
I did. I mean, that's privately. There's nothing that this committee is going to do with that at this point. But so the kind of message you got, I think a couple of the comments have kind of gestured towards this, is make what we have more appealing. Make Milano more appealing. Add some art, add some this, add some that. And see what we can do with San Pablo and make that more. But it seems like that's a role that we could play. But
I just want to say that. Sorry, interrupt. I apologize.
No, that's fine.
The way I would do it is by incentivizing free enterprise rather than trying to pick them ourselves as a city.
Right. I just mean doing what the city can do. Yes. Which is the rightful role of the city.
Yes.
To make it more appealing.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I agree 100%.
You didn't mention it, although it is one of our commercial areas, so to speak, but that whole strip along the freeways.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, there's, tenants come and go, buildings come and go. We once had the Albany Steel Company down there.
Yeah.
And we lost them, but we also decreased our carbon footprint by, 30% or something when it happened. And there's other space like that could be turned into something interesting that would be under the economic development flag. Any ideas about that space?
No, I met the owner of that. He was trying to turn it into a multi-tenant kind of thing. After she left, and I can't remember what all happened there, but I know that. So one of the transactions I showed you was the granite and tile guy who bought the building he's in, and it's a good business. It's a regional kind of draw, and so I would say that in terms of tax revenue, any kind of visibility on the freeway, regional draw, bigger boxes from a retail point of view. So if retail is not permitted there, rezone it to allow a bigger box to move in, and these are people who can come in off the highway, spend their money, and leave, right, and not clog up our streets and roads. And so I think that's what I would do with it. It's not necessarily, elegant, but I think it's very practical. Yeah.
Okay. There was, and I think the committee did get a presentation on the history of cannabis retail or attempts at some point. I haven't found it on what meeting that was in. I'm kind of curious, but there was a whole cannabis group that also wanted that building pre-pandemic. And I personally thought that was a great idea because the revenues, the city like Emeryville, they're getting out of cannabis are, well over $500,000 a year in tax revenue. But a lost opportunity perhaps, but there may be other places and particularly in that area.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. And I think, so the city of Emeryville says, okay, we want cannabis, but we don't want just any cannabis. We want no growth, so you can't grow cannabis in Emeryville.
Right.
Because they're worried about fire hazards or whatever they are and the power usage. So, but I did a deal with a distribution company there who's going to, and there's a lot of demand for space from cannabis users because there's a lot of places they won't go. And by the time they go through the whole process with the city and the police department and the fire department, these are checked out as pretty people on the up and up. They're straight shooters and good people. And so, early on, I was anti-marijuana, I would say, not personally, but just I was, they came from an outlaw culture, if you like, a little bit. But I think that whole, they learn how to pay their bills like normal people rather than bringing you sacks of cash. And, it's much more orderly, organized, and by the book now. So I would definitely not oppose it, not any and all uses, but the right kinds of cannabis users. Again, I think you'd have to have a big study about what the right kinds would be. But
yeah, I hope we can, maybe this committee can help. If others feel like that, it could help kind of nudge the city along, because every city around us is making pretty large sums of tax money off of this, and it seems a little nuts that we're not. But that's starting to go off in a different direction. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Did we step into it again, Tom?
No, I think that was probably in the clear.
Okay.
I think I actually asked when we at the meeting where we did have that presentation, Member Moss. I think I did ask about that because they had contacted Chamber of Commerce about it, and it was a warehouse distribution facility. And I asked Jeff, and he said, yeah, I don't think they ever did an application or anything. So we don't know what happened with that, but it did go away. Member,
we're good. Yeah, I was kind of curious about that. I didn't track it very much, but I know that when it first came up, the city made the requirements for where you could open up an establishment almost impossible to meet on intentionally. Mm-hmm. So has that changed now? Is it?
I don't know that it's changed, but it could change. I mean, I think, whatever we had on that Cannabis Act that got passed a long time ago, if there was a will, there's a way. It's kind of my attitude about a lot of this stuff. It's just like zoning, it isn't handed down from God. It's something that we come up with and then decide to go ahead on.
Yeah, because it seemed to me that I remember I knew a lawyer that actually represented some cannabis growers and sellers and so on, and they were part of the deal, and they were very interested in seeing if they could work out spaces. And I know that Oakland's done it, Berkeley's done it, pretty much everybody else has done it. Mm-hmm. Albany has not. So I'm assuming it's because Albany doesn't want to do it.
I mean, it's trickier in Albany. There's all these requirements of not being close to schools, right? And we're a small town, so it's just a lot harder to do here. But again, replace the steel company with a cannabis distribution company and get a lot more revenue for the city. I don't see how that harms any of the students or families or anything. It just seems like would be a nice thing to do. Yeah.
Well, I understand that, but and I don't know I mean, I don't claim to know much about the cannabis business, except that my recollection was it was the kind of thing you did sneaking around on a corner and somebody would slip you something.
Yeah.
Not anymore. Not anymore.
Maybe we could take that Christmas tree lot and set it up as a bunch of little corners and people listening to each other, and you hand your money in one
Okay,
place.
I think we've heard enough from Member Chasty tonight. I think we can move on.
But if we want, if we were going to do it, there are storefronts on San Pablo and storefronts on Solano that could work for a small. I mean, I don't know if you need a very large operation. Maybe people are happy to have a small operation that meets their needs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would probably be worth going and reviewing the meeting where we did talk about that, because we got a whole presentation on where it is right now. And I'm just off the top of my head, I'm not remembering, but I know.
Do you recall what meeting that was? Because I was kind of quickly going through agendas, and I thought it was in July at one point, but then it wasn't, as far as I could tell.
I'll look back, or maybe Brennan can help.
Yeah, I'll send you a link.
Yeah,
I think it might have been in April or May, but I'll send you a link.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other? Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, I want to thank you for including me in your conversation tonight.
I think we've got one more question over here before we sign off. Member Carlton has to go up.
Oh, I was just going to say that it was, I believe it was the June meeting was a cannabis.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. All right, Tom, I thank you so much. Very valuable information. Certainly appreciate your time.
Mm-hmm. Again, I appreciate the opportunity. I live here, and I love this town, and I raise my kids here and my family here. And so, it's near and dear to my heart. So thank you for having me. Okay.
Absolutely.
Good to see you, Tom. Always good to see you.
Could you post the slideshow that you did, the PowerPoint, somewhere where we could look at it?
If you want it, Brennan can give it to you. Okay, he has a copy of it. I kind of don't want to see this recording, to be honest with you.
Oh, none of us do. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I think we'll close this item and move on to, I believe, future agenda items.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye,
Yeah,
Tom.
thank you. Thank you so much, Tom.
Bye.
Have a good night. Any ideas, suggestions, requests for future agenda items? I will say that I'm working on the application to go to council to amend our work plan so that we can have something to talk about. That doesn't reliant on somebody acting first. So, any agenda items you'd like to bring up?
I have a question. I noticed that is somebody from the committee going to the East Bay Economic Development Group? It may be EDA.
Yeah. I monitored that a little bit, but if you wanted to involve in that would be good.
I did that for a while when I was on council, but I think it would be great if somebody would go. I've
been doing that for the last couple of years through the chamber as well, but I can continue doing that.
Okay, because that's also a lot of trends get discussed there, and might be something you want to add to the mix of what's going on in the Bay Area, just like commercial real estate.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Other suggestions, agenda items? Seeing none, I think we can close the meeting. The next meeting is January, so it'll be early January. It's not in front of me. But welcome, Member Moss. Happy to have you here. Thank you, everybody, and happy holidays.
Yeah,
here we are.
This is fun. This is a lot more fun than in council. So at least so far.
Well, we try to. That's the point. We're all here just to have fun. That's what we're here for. All right.
Yeah. Well, I think it can actually be very productive too. So I look
very
forward.
Good. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye, kids.
Bye.
Bye-bye.